Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered how to test someone's vocabulary knowledge quickly, especially if they're learning a new language like Turkish? Well, today we're diving into a really clever way researchers have figured this out. So imagine you are learning Turkish and someone wants to know how much vocabulary, giving you a giant list of words to define or use in sentences would take forever, right? Researchers Lara, Kelly-Iturriaga and her team faced this exact problem. They wanted to create a super quick and easy test for people learning Turkish as a second language, or L2 Turkish. They called it LexTurk. The idea behind LexTurk is borrowed from a similar test for English called LexTALE. It's a bit like a guessing game, but for words. The test gives you a bunch of letter strings and asks you to decide if each one is a real Turkish word or just a made-up one. To test their new LexTurk tool, the researchers gathered two groups of people. One group knew Turkish as their first language, essentially native speakers. The other group were learners of Turkish with Azerbaijani as their first language, but they were living in Turkey and could speak Turkish. They also made sure to get a good variety of people with different language backgrounds and ages. Looking at the results, we can see some interesting differences. For example, the average age was pretty similar between the groups, but the native Turkish speakers, the L1 Turkish group, obviously had an age of acquisition of 0 because, well, it's their first language. The L2 Turkish learners, on average, started learning Turkish around age 7. And when it came to the test itself, the native speakers scored higher, which makes sense. The L1 Turkish group got an average LexTurk score of about 93%, while the L2 Turkish learners scored around 89%. This difference was statistically significant, meaning it wasn't just a random fluke. So how did they score it? It is pretty straightforward. For the real Turkish words, they counted how many you got right out of 40. For the made-up words, they counted how many you correctly identified as fake out of 20. They then averaged these two scores. The ultimate goal is to get 100%, meaning you correctly identified every real word and rejected every fake one. The results showed that the L2 Turkish group didn't do quite as well as the native speakers. The p-value here, which is 0.02, is like a flukometer. A low p-value, like this one, tells us that the chances of this result happening by random luck are very small, so it is likely a real difference. The Cohen's d of minus 0.56 is a measure of how big that difference is, and it is considered a medium effect size, not huge but definitely noticeable. Now, the really interesting part for language learners. The researchers wanted to see if how long someone had been learning Turkish, or how much they were exposed to and used Turkish, related to their LexTurk score. And guess what? They found a connection. For the L2 Turkish learners, the more years they had spent learning Turkish, the better their LexTurk score tended to be. That correlation, a measure of how two things move together, was around 0.45, which is considered moderate, and it was statistically significant, meaning it is unlikely to be a coincidence. They also looked at how much Turkish people were exposed to in their daily lives. Again, they found a similar pattern. Those who had higher exposure to Turkish also tended to have higher LexTurk scores. And it was the same story when they looked at how much Turkish people actually used. The more they used it, the better their scores. These correlations, around 0.49 for exposure and 0.52 for use, are moderate and significant, telling us that actively engaging with the language really does seem to boost vocabulary knowledge. Finally, the researchers checked how reliable LexTurk is, meaning if you gave the test to the same person again, would they get a similar score? They used some statistical magic like Cronbach's alpha and ICC, and the numbers came back looking really good. An alpha of 0.84 and an ICC of 0.81 are high, suggesting the test is consistent and dependable, whether used for native speakers or learners. So, what's the big takeaway here? LexTurk seems to be a really solid and quick tool for measuring how large someone's Turkish vocabulary is, especially for learners. It is like a vocabulary quick check. It works for both beginners and maybe even more advanced learners. One cool thing about this study is that it's a preprint, meaning it is out there for everyone to see and comment on before it goes through the official peer review process. This allows for faster sharing of research findings. However, the researchers were smart to point out that they didn't collect self-reported proficiency data. This means they couldn't directly compare what the LexTurk test said about someone's vocabulary to what the learners themselves thought about their own skills. Future studies, they suggest, could definitely do this to further confirm how good LexTurk really is. Also, the participants were all living in Turkey, which is a great environment for learning Turkish. But it might be interesting to see how the test performs with learners in different settings. Overall, LexTurk is a promising development for anyone involved in teaching or learning Turkish. It offers a fast, objective way to get a snapshot of someone's lexical knowledge. It is a great example of how researchers are constantly innovating to make language assessment more efficient and accurate. I think it is fantastic that they've created something that can help teachers and learners understand progress better and faster. What do you think about LexTurk? Have you ever taken a similar vocabulary test when learning a new language? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more dives into fascinating research. See you next time.